Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our intern sharing day for product designers. I'll just quickly go through today's agenda. We'll start with an introduction to OGP by our director, Hong, and then we'll go into sharings by 3 of our interns. And then lastly, we'll end with a Q&A panel. We'll be posting a Pigeonhole link soon, so feel free to drop your questions there and upvote the questions that you want answered, and we'll have our panelists answer your questions at the end. But without further ado, I'll pass it to Hong to tell us a little bit about open government products.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Hey, everyone. All right, let me share my slides real quick. Cool. So hey, yeah, so my name's Hong. I'm the director of OGP, and like thanks for joining us here today. So today we're going to have sharings by 3 of our interns who have been with us for the past few months, Pras, Vivian, and Jess. But before I get there, I thought, so for those of you who may not be familiar with the team and who we are and what we do, I thought I'd just give you a quick intro to quick intro to that. So this is who we are. OGP stands for Open Government Products. We're we're experimental team of engineers, designers, and product managers who build technology for the public good. So we're about like 40 something, I think getting close to 50 people or so now. And yeah, we build a whole bunch of different products in government. Yeah, these are some of the things that we've worked on. So the stuff that's probably we're most well known for is Parking SG, but Parking SG is actually one of our smallest products. I think we've only got about 2 people working on that at any one time. Stuff that you might be more familiar with recently is like Postman. So if you've been receiving some of the WhatsApp updates from the government about COVID, that's running from Postman. And if you receive your SMS link to book your vaccine recently, both the SMS sending, which was built that runs on Postman, and vaccine.gov.sg is another thing that we worked on. So yeah, you can see that we run a whole bunch of products across the government. And with about 40 to 50 people, there's like maybe only like 3 or 4 people per product. So it's a pretty small, pretty lean team. And that's kind of the point. The OGP basically started out as this concept of what if we built an organization that operated like a modern tech company, but worked on public sector problems. So as you know, the government's having a lot of efforts right now to try and digitize and modernize and make things more efficient, especially now that we have to work remotely. But if you look at a lot of our efforts, you're taking some really big organizations with a lot of legacy problems and a lot of legacy constraints and everything, and trying to bring them and try to modernize them. So that can you make progress, but it can only go so far and so fast. So the idea of OGP is to be that sort of a fast-moving team to identify problems that maybe aren't so well defined yet, that maybe no one has a sort of good handle on yet, build solutions quickly, get them deployed, and sort of be an example of what modern looks like, so that the other organizations which are sort of a bit more conservative and a bit more risk averse can have that confidence that when they do adopt modern when they do adopt digital solutions or do try to build modern tech practices or design practices and things like that, it's not just sort of a leap of faith. They have somebody who's been there, who's got this work through, and they can sort of follow to do so. And yeah, basically our mission is quite straightforward. We experiment, demonstrate, and propagate. So we experiment with new tech practices as well as new, not just new technology, but new organizational practices as well. So for example, doing these intern sharings is one of the things that we're trying to experiment with and try to get more people more understanding of greater engagement of how the government's run and how things and the things that we build, as well as how we do recruiting, how we run how we run our people operations. We demonstrate these practices. So this is not just a sort of think tank kind of team where you just come up with policy proposals. The idea is that any idea that we think could be a good way of running an organization, we have to actually practice it ourselves and get it running, for ourselves first, so that we know whether it actually works in practice. And then finally, a big part of our role is propagation. Basically, we identify, once we sort of have an idea of, a worked in practice example of how you can use some modern design tools or modern tech practices, or even just basic things like how to do peer feedback and recruiting in a better way. We then we package this up into a bunch of slides and a bunch of resources, and we give talks to the rest of government, try to sort of show them and teach them how we do it, and hopefully encourage them to do the same. The end goal is that you have all this creativity, all this intelligence, and all this brilliance in the private sector about how to do food delivery and how to do, like ride sharing, how to do like online shopping and like all these other tools and everything like that. And the idea is you can take just a fraction of all that sort of like intelligence and creativity and drive and bring that to the public sector. We can do a lot of good. So yeah, that's who we are. We're OGP. We're we're a relatively small team, governments of size-wise. And so Pras, Viv, and Jess will be talking to you about some of the work they've been doing with us over this past summer. So with that, I'm not going to take up any more time. Back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Hong. Thanks for the introduction. So now I'll introduce our 3 speakers. So first we have Jess, who is a LaSalle graduate in design communication. She's been working on our vaccine operations. Next, we'll have Pras, who is an NUS Year 2 industrial design student. He's been working on Form and ASCAV. And then lastly, we'll have Vivian, who is a Year 2 student at NTU studying Renaissance engineering. And she's been working on Isomer and Postman. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Jess.
Yeah. So hi guys, thank you all for coming. So we're gonna bring you guys through the lens of Jess, Pras, Viv, our journey as a product design interns. So I'm gonna start off by introducing a fun fact about myself. So a fun fact about myself is I spend most of my mornings at F45. So high five if you can relate exercising early in the morning. Yeah, but a little bit about my past experience before OGP. So a little bit of context, I've actually worked 3 years prior to this internship at an independent studio in Singapore as a visual designer within the hospitality industry. And here are some of the clients that I've worked with previously. So I'm going to be flashing through some of my works that I did previously. So I was also given the opportunity to actually work across the creative disciplines with different people, such as photographers, videographers, architects, and even interior designers. So moving on with life, I decided to pivot or career switch from being a graphic designer to a product designer. So why is that? So I've always been interested in exploring the tech industry, engineering industry, and even strategy and research fields. And the reason why I've always wanted to explore being a product designer, especially in the government sector, is because how can I, as a designer, come into the picture and make an impact, positive impact towards the things that I do as a designer, and basically to make people's lives a little bit better. So find a need and meet it. So here's where all my journey began as an in the pursuit of being aspiring UI/UX designer in OGP. So I'm currently involved in 2 major projects, which are actually Vault and a vaccination, which are the COVID vaccination booking system in Singapore. So for COVID vaccination, I got the opportunity to work on a minor feature on the clinic booking system, which is actually the drop-down feature for users to select their particular patient's profile. So I've worked closely with my middle manager to achieve this, and I'm gonna just flash you through what was the feature. So this was actually used by the clinic end system. And my main key takeaway on this project was, while working in a larger team with such huge scale and complexity of the nature of the project, these small components actually matter to a larger scale. So apart from the design aspect, I actually get to witness and learn so much from the team that runs the complex operations and the strategy management behind the whole COVID booking system nationwide. So I would like to also thank and kudos to the whole team for doing a great job and for achieving 60.5% nationwide vaccination rate so far. Yay! So for those of you who have not done your vaccination, you can register here. So yeah. Continuing to my next project that I was involved in was actually Vault. So a lot of you might have think, what is this Vault? Like you might have think that it involves some kind of secret banking thing or whatever safe space. I mean, yes, it is a safe space, but what is Vault exactly, right? So Vault actually is a central data management platform used within the government agency. So what do I mean by data management platform? So for example, if I want to pass one data or one file from one public officer to another, Vault acts as a platform for you to upload, to share your data, and to even extract the necessary data. And because it's not a non-public facing product, and these are actually used inside the government agency. So the current stage of Vault is actually in a current revamp. So I was also given the opportunity to do a rebranding for the logo. So in this case, being a product designer or UI/UX designer you're not only expected, or you're not only designing screens, but you're also doing some rebranding purpose for this revamping case. So this was the logo before, and this was the logo after, and here's my contribution to it. So what was the reason behind the revamping was because we found that there are a lot of usability issues within the product itself. And to start off, we wanted to do the revamping of the search page, which basically is just to really improve the user's search experience of finding and extracting data that they need. So making the experience of data as seamless as possible, as easy as online shopping. So here's a rough, here was the screen, or rather the search page before the revamp. And here's the page after the revamp. So as you can see, like we kind of redid a lot of elements to the search page, the search bar, and then the view all button. We allowed a view all button. So it is more intuitive. For example, taking examples from platforms like Spotify, right? You get to see the whole trending playlist, for example, or recent playlists. So we wanted to make it seem as intuitive and as relevant as possible, as well as allowing users to search by tags, and even having that sort by function. As well as going down to the details of the loading state, as well as on-click search. So even down to the empty state or the no results page. So and the list goes on, right? And a lot of these are done with decision-making and research for each touch point to really enhance the overall search experience. So there was this one day where we had this team discussion on product direction and product re-envisioning. So I really got lost along the way. And then, sorry, but don't worry, I was lost, but I figured my way along the way. And what were my main takeaway on this being lost state was that I did so many research on it. I did a lot of reading. I asked around because your colleagues don't buy it, and really discuss it with your team because they're really the best people to go to. So after much discussion, brainstorming, and synthesizing with my team, my RO, my middle manager in this case, and I explored some potential UI features after the product re-envisioning. So when I mean some, we did lots of low fidelity mockups to see how can we achieve Vault as a product. So we did lots and lots of exploration on the product itself. And then, so after weeks of nonstop exploration and low fidelity iterations, I got lost again. Okay, I'm just kidding. So instead of me getting lost again, which is not helping the team to move forward, I decided to also take the initiative to really ask the team and make sure that we're all aligned on the same page to achieve the same goal or agenda. So I was asking the team, hey team, what is Vault's vision? What are we trying to achieve? Are we moving towards the right direction? And I think it's important to do some serious user research and gather relevant use cases to back our exploration and validate from there. So let's sync up and discuss. So then important lesson, what I've learned over 24 years of living was to really learn how to take a step back and see the bigger picture, be critical with yourself and evaluate your decisions along the way and sync up with your team and talk it out and make sure that, figure out what are the priorities that we can take on further to achieve that product direction or goal. So then coming back to that, we decided to conduct user research and gather relevant use cases. And what becomes critical in this stage was to validate. So these research findings actually help to direct the product's objectives and goals, validate our ideas and exploration, and really identify users' pain points that was not addressed by the product. So it is important to do all the groundwork so that it helps the team moving and to be able to achieve that same alignment and letting everyone be on the same page as a team. Yeah, so yay. So we are currently moving in one direction as a team. And a quick reflection involved is that there are times when we need to step back and we look if we are all aligned as a team and how do we move forward from there, right? So it's not always smooth sailing, rainbows and butterflies, but when there's a crisis in terms of the product direction or goal, it's really also eventually about how you manage and resolve the problem together as a team. So here are all my takeaways from this OGP experience. Being an intern in OGP was really to building that good rapport with or working relationship and dynamics with your team members, and of course all your colleagues, because you're basically seeing them every day. You get to work with them, accept constructive criticism, reflect and improve from there, as well as I realized that documentation is such an important aspect in your working, and with proper research you'll have a solid ground to build up upon. And I'm not saying that UI is not important, but one can't exist without the other. So yeah, so I'm sorry, moving on to you, Pras.
Give me a second, let me share my screen. Yeah, so yeah, cool stuff, Jess. Moving on to my stuff. So I'm a part-time student, full-time designer, studying at NUS, the Division of Industrial Design. And as a designer, I love the creative use of technology and to design meaningful and memorable experiences for users. So at school, I actually explored how computer vision can be used to make DIY keyboard controls. And with our app, users could remap these inputs to any digital actions. Also, I've actually explored UI UX within the AR glasses space to promote a more healthy and active lifestyle by aiding users to make better life choices. So my projects in NUS have been quite tech heavy, but this kind of built an appreciation of crafting meaningful and digital experiences. So this kind of led me towards OGP, where they kind of use technology to build digital products that positively impact the public. So let me just go through what stuff I do at OGP. And we're working on two main projects, Forms as well as AskGov. So Forms is a platform that allows agencies to build government-related forms. This is the forms for registering the COVID-19 vaccination. So I played a small role in this project, and it was basically this UX problem when the public wanted to fill in a specific date field. Agency officials wanted to be able to restrict the calendar period to their specifications. And even though it was a very simple problem at first, it slowly spiraled to a much bigger UX issue. So I had to do weeks of comparative research, mock-ups, as well as user testing. But finally, we managed to find a user flow that caters to the needs of the various agencies. So great. But I was so surprised that one feature could actually take weeks of research and testing. And at the same time, I actually worked on this problem with the aid of actually a design system. So this is a design system set up in the Figma. And basically, it is one of the most comprehensive design systems ever that I've seen. So it utilizes Figma variants to enable us to design our user interfaces. So this makes design so much more quicker and much more consistent. It also has a very super clear organization of components that's like broken down into its foundational elements. These elements like make up the library of components, which in turn like forms patterns that are repeated across UI screens. So for example, these are like the utilities in terms of like say shadows, cursors, dividers, spacings. These are the main components itself, like buttons, and finally like patterns in which how it can be used in the actual screen itself. It even includes like design guidelines on like how it should be used so that future designers don't have to like rediscover the wheel. You can just use the system components properly. And this amazing design system was made by Pearly, my mentor here at OGP. So given that design systems are a living document, right? Here are some of my own contributions to it. So I implemented a button input group component, and I kind of like have some guidelines on how it should properly be used. Also, I actually designed popovers, how it should appear in a desktop view as well as a mobile view. So in my documentation, I gave some examples on how future designers could actually just copy paste this thing onto their own UI screen. So that's kind of like wraps up for forms. Moving on to AskGov. And AskGov is a platform for public to actually find government-related inquiries. And this is a relatively new project, still in its infancy stage. And such infant products often run to like several problems, and we see similar products on the market. So one of the main question was like, what is the value that we are creating by building it ourselves? So to solve this problem, I had to do a lot of like comparative research of similar products. This was like a reconstruction of the Zendesk information architecture to understand what kind of like features they offered. Also, I had to conduct lots of like user interviews, and then from that, I kind of actually synthesized user personas. And then afterwards, we ran a workshop with the team to come to a common consensus of the product direction, as well as to brainstorm on possible solutions that could solve the user's pain points. So I feel that designer's role is not just limited to the UI UX, we can deeply influence even the product direction as well. And since it was a new project, I was given the opportunity to like design a brand identity for a new product like AskGov. So for this, we had to actually work with the team to understand what kind of values they want to portray. And we kind of like decided on being approachable, official, and reliable. I went to actually explore similar products in the market, get some references, and try to build like a mood board. Finally, kind of explore the color red to give a more warm and official Singapore look. And then afterwards, I went to actually do a lot of like icons with my teams to actually understand what kind of like concepts we can actually explore to actually portray these concepts. From there, I actually went to explore different typefaces and kind of finally decided on like the Airbnb serial typeface, as he provided a good balance of being professional and approachable. I expanded on like the values and traits that we compiled and kind of get some interesting logo marks as well. And finally was the sketching phase, right? And from that sketching phase, I went to digitalize the things that I really liked a lot. I kind of narrowed down to 3. And from there, I went to explore color and how it could be used in terms of like headers, logos, and illustrations as well. So, and given that red is a very dangerous color because often it is used to present error messages, I did very selective in its proposed usage as well as in the overall user interface. So currently, I'm wrapping up my designs with the product identity deck for AskGov. And my key takeaway is that products need to have a proper user research in the form of surveys, interviews, so that the rationales for the product and design decisions are clear. And at the same time, documentation of our process and research is essential for handover to the next designer as well. So yeah, take it away, Viv.
Okay, let me share screen. Continue. All right, 6 stuff for us. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'm Viv. I'm an electrical engineer by degree, and I'm a UI UX designer at heart. So one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, why did I switch to UX? So my journey through UX started when I initiated a project to build assistive kitchen equipment for the visually impaired. And that was when I discovered the wonderful world of design thinking. And I found that the emphasis on meeting human needs and solving actual human problems resonated with me.
So then I brought this new knowledge and formed a UX team of one at a student-led robotics startup. But throughout this whole journey, I have been working on my own, all by myself. Naturally, this led to a lot of self-doubt, and with no mentor, I didn't know if I was doing this UX thing right. So I figured I should apply for a design internship to get the mentorship and exposure that I needed to grow further as a UX designer. So I applied for OGP, and spoiler alert, I got in. So there are three goals that I set for myself at the start of the internship. The first one is to solve real world problems, learn from other designers, and learn by doing. And boy, let me tell you, I can honestly say that I did quite a number of things here. So these were the three main problems I worked on in my time here. So let's start with the first one. On my very first day of work, and in fact, actually within the first hour, my mentor told me, okay, there's this problem. We don't have a consistent brand experience across the OGP products, even though they're supposed to be part of the same product suite. So we decided that the best place to start making the brand experience consistent would be the login screens, because every product has a login screen. So as you can see, they look pretty different and they don't look like they belong to the same suite. So the first thing I did was to research on login flows. And after designing my first draft, I held a design critique session with the PMs, which are product managers. And this is what the new login screen looks like for now. So some of the changes I made were, firstly, adding a value proposition so users know what this product can do for them. And then I also enhanced the copy to convey the immediacy of using the product. I improved the inline validation and also standardized the button label. So the next step would be user testing these with a product. Moving on to the next problem that I worked on, government websites are hard to navigate. For this problem, I worked with the Isomer team, and I had a design buddy to work with for this, so shout out to Natalie. And if you're wondering what Isomer is, you can think of it as the Squarespace for government agencies. Our goal is to help agencies build better government websites by nudging them in the right direction. So here's an example of a website that was not built by Isomer. And here's an example of a website built by Isomer. So you can see that it has a very distinctive template, but Isomer still has many limitations, and we're working on revamping the website building experience for the next version. So how might we improve the next version of Isomer? We started our user interviews. We interviewed 6 agency users. And from there, we discovered that actually most users found Isomer easy to learn, but there were some limitations. And those were that Isomer was lacking necessary components for navigating massive sites. Some concepts were confusing, and users also want more layouts for the template. So following this, we did lo-fi wireframes, a card sorting exercise, and more design crit sessions with the whole team. That includes the engineers and the PM. From there, we did prototypes, and what we'll be doing next is user testing to validate the flow that we proposed. So finally, the last problem that I was working on, which is that the public don't know how to identify scams. So there are 2 parts to this problem. The first one is that there were phishing government websites, and some members of the public were unsure of how to identify legit Gov websites. So here's the current masthead. The problem with it is that it's easily replicated on a fake site with basic HTML. So we wanted to create an enhanced masthead. And this masthead would educate the general public to identify legit government websites. So here's the new one. You can click on it to expand, and it will show you tips on how to identify the .gov.sg domain and secure websites. The next problem was that real government emails sent by postmen could be perceived as fishy, and some people needed help to identify legit government emails. So to explain what Postman is, to put it simply, it's like MailChimp for the government. You can send emails, you can mass send emails to any member of the public with this messaging platform. So this is how it looks like when you receive an email from Postman. If you think about it, when you receive this email in your inbox, you can see that oh, it's coming from postman.gov.sg. And if you don't know what Postman is, they could be suspicious of it and they may not even open it. But if you do choose to open it, they'll see something like this. As you can see, it's a basic text email. And if you quickly glance at the bottom, you see that, oh, actually this email is from MOE. But when you look back at the top, it says that it's sent by Postman. So there's a discrepancy in the sender name, which can be confusing to the recipient, and we can understand why it raises suspicions about the legitimacy. So this legitimacy, combined with the plain text style of the email, reduces the perceived legitimacy of this email. So the next step was quite clear. We needed a redesign, and we needed to design it such that when they open the email, users don't doubt its legitimacy. If users had a mental checklist of email legitimacy markers, we want to tick everything on that list. But the thing is, scam emails can still look pretty legitimate. Here's an example of one from gov.uk, but it's actually not from gov.uk, it's a scam. So from the previous example, we quickly realized that on top of appearing legitimate, we needed to go a step further and educate the public on how to recognize official government agency emails. So this brings us to the final design. Immediately, you'll notice that the Postman email template is kept as clean as possible so that the focus is on the content. This way, it's versatile and can be used for many different purposes. For example, some agencies use Postman to send newsletters. Usually they're brightly colored, so we keep the template clean and white so that it wouldn't clash with the varied content. Okay, so let's dive deeper into some of the design decisions. The sender name is no longer postman.gov.sg. We've allowed agency users to change the sender name to match the content of the email. We also added a masthead, which says Singapore government emails are sent from .gov.sg addresses, to train users to look at the domain of the email address to verify that it is indeed a genuine government email. The agency's logo will also be included at the top. This makes the email resemble a letter from the government, but we didn't want the email to look too clinical or harsh. So we softened the edges a bit with rounded corners around the borders of the email to make it seem more approachable and friendly. For the body text, we made some key typography decisions based on Google Material Design Guidelines. For example, we followed the recommended character length of each line while also providing enough space in the container to include tables. Because the character length is quite long, we increased the line spacing to increase the readability on desktop. And at the end of the email, we wanted to really drive in the legitimacy of this email one more time. So we added agency details and a Postman footer to make it look more professional. So with the help of the engineering team, we implemented this email template and blasted an announcement email. And some users even replied and expressed their appreciation for the work we were doing at Postman. And I thought it was really, really fulfilling when I saw some of the replies we got. So looking back at these problems and going back to my checklist, I don't think I really solved or completely eradicated any real world problems, but I think I can safely say that I alleviated at least some real world problems, so I can check that off my list. Secondly, the designers are all very open to bounce ideas off, and I'm really grateful for the help and mentorship. So yes, definitely got to learn from other designers. And lastly, I worked on so many cool and impactful things during my internship journey, and I can confidently say I have learned so much from my experience here. All in all, I had a really fulfilling time at OGP. Yep. So moving on to now the fun stuff that we do to kind of showcase our culture here at OGP. At OGP, we don't just work, we also know how to have fun. And we especially love to wear the same clothes. Yep, so that's all, folks. Thanks for listening to our presentations.
Thanks so much, Viv, Pras, and Jess for that insightful sharing and all your great pictures. So now we're going to transition to the Q&A portion of our talk today. So we'll be bringing back Viv, Pras, and Jess, as well as Hong. And then I'll be introducing our other panelist, who is Russell, our People Ops manager. So again, if you haven't gotten a chance yet, please go to Pigeonhole and ask your questions there. I know there's a few already. So without further ado, I'll get started on our top question. So the first question with 13 votes is, what are the skills needed to join as a product design intern? And I think there's a few HR questions that are related to that. So I'll pass this one to Russell first to start off, and then all the other interns can add on.
Cool, thanks, Sarah, and hi, everyone. Also have a dog on my lap because he's very barky, so just excuse if you see a dog on camera. So I'll give a brief answer to this. I'll let the designers add on. There's a bunch of HR questions I'll answer at the same time, just to give a more holistic answer. So skills needed, as you can tell from our interns, they come from quite varied backgrounds, right? So what I'll say is fundamentally, we don't necessarily look at what's your educational pedigree, what degree do you hold, etc. We look more at demonstrated ability. That reflects how we work. That reflects, therefore, how we also hire, how we assess interns, how we assess full-timers, right? So when you talk about UI UX design, that's obviously important to us. When you talk about other elements of design as well, we have people with graphic design background. If you can't have UX research, interaction design, all these are important, right? Fundamentally, what we do instead is we look at portfolio. So we look at demonstrated ability more than actual certification. More broadly, there was another question up there I saw about what are some of the top 3 attributes we look for. So beyond the technical skills, broadly how we hire as well in OGP is we look across 4 things. So yes, it's very important. We are skills. I mean, we need people to do the work, and we want to bring in people with the skills to do so. But beyond the actual demonstrated ability, we also look at how well people can communicate. That's just not just communicating within the field, but communicating across the field, especially because we work in quite lean cross-functional product teams. It's really important to us. We also look at fundamentally whether people are interested, are passionate, and care about wanting to build tech for public good, because that fundamentally is what we're about, and we're about pushing the envelope of how we do that. And lastly, what we look at is also the initiative people bring when they're doing that, right? So very much what we are as a team, and this interns full-timers alike, we're not people who sit down and kind of receive orders to fulfill or check boxes to check, but fundamentally everyone here, including the interns, especially the interns, are people who care about public good, who are then taking the skills that they have and pushing, right, to make public good. And that really does reflect in how then we kind of assess and look at interns as well as full-timers.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Russell. So I want to pass this on to the interns. So Viv, Jess, Pras, anything to add? Any specific skills you think are important to be a product design intern at OGP?
So at least for me, I felt it's important to actually have a good design eye at the very basic. So whether you're from like a graphic design background or just a design background, always on design background, I think it's still very, very useful, because I think that the design eye is important to actually have the aesthetics down. It'll be good to have some UX skills, so like understanding like what's the UX processes involved. For example, like say research, design, prototyping and testing, these kind of like concepts in mind already. But I think personally for me, my skills were not that strong, but I learned all these processes in OGP as well. Also, I think it's important to like know these prototyping tools. For example, let's say Figma, because I think the team heavily uses Figma over here. Viv, anything else to add on?
I would piggyback on the Figma point. I think, yeah, we are quite heavily using Figma, so knowledge of like how to use variant components, things like that. I think that will be quite useful when you join. But otherwise, I think you will also learn a lot on the job. More importantly, I think is like whether when you apply, whether you show like the values that we look out, what that OGP looks out for. Yeah.
Okay, thanks guys for sharing. So I'll go on to the next question. Our next most popular question is for Jess. Thanks, Jess, for your insightful sharing. Will you be able to share how you managed to transit successfully as a product design intern? For example, did you do any online courses?
Okay, thank you for asking this. Tapping on the previous question, what Pras and Viv actually mentioned was also, yes, I did an online course, but it was actually very brief is to really understand the overall essence of what is a UI UX design, right? So I get to also learn a Figma prior to my internship, at least to have that foundation level. And in terms of UX, I actually did a lot of research process, and I implemented a lot of research onto my previous job and as a designer myself. So I guess I would confidently say that I'm stronger in the research area, but when it comes to UI UX design as a general, right, how did I manage to transit was I really learned a lot in terms of my experience here in OGP. So I would honestly say that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you go through an online course, it will teach you like that much. There's nothing compared to having that on-the-job learning, get to meet the real team, solving real-world problems, as what Viv and Pras mentioned, and having to go through or collaborate with your colleagues on the job itself. So there's nothing compared to like having on-the-job learning or having an internship rather than like doing an online course. Because for me, the limitation for online course is, let's say, limitation to having that face-to-face interaction, and then having to, in general, that having that real problem to solve or to understand from, right? And in terms of, even though I mentioned that I've actually, I was strong in research, but when I joined OGP as well, I really get to interact with a lot of users and understand their pain points, which really helped me and the rest of the team to be able to understand the product direction as well, and to be able to solve that problem as well. So yeah, I guess that's my main takeaway in terms of transitioning from becoming a graphic designer to a product design intern.
Thanks so much, Jess, for sharing. So next question for our interns. How is the design culture like in OGP? Anyone want to take this first? Maybe Viv?
How's the design culture like? Okay, so the team is actually very small. The design team in OGP is really small. I think how many people are there on the team right now? Like 5, 6. Yeah. 5, 6. Around there, basically at least 5 people. So because we are such a small team, the designers are all very supportive of each other. They're also very friendly, so you can literally just approach them about any question that you have, and they'd be all super helpful, and they are more than willing to help you out. Yeah. I think if you look at our products, you also see that I feel like the design really stands out so much compared to other government products, and I think it's a pretty strong focus on design here at OGP. Yeah.
Tapping on that, I guess what Viv mentioned, you can literally ask anything. So generally as a design team, we'll always bounce off each other for suggestions, and we'll do like a week. So for example, we always have sync ups every Thursday to just generally discuss about how are things doing on your end in terms of your product, whether or not we need help, and if we'll always help each other out, because generally it's quite a small team. So I guess it's very empowering to be able to be part of the design team in OGP.
Yeah, I think just to add on, because since our design team is a bit smaller, it's not hierarchical. Because of that, we can easily just approach anyone on that team for support. So I mean, there's a benefit of having a smaller team, right? Even when full-timers you want a second opinion, even we may give some input to them as well. So I guess the culture is very, very supportive. Yeah.
Thanks, guys, for your answers. So I'll go on to the next question, which is, I think you guys touched on this a little bit earlier, but what product design software does OGP use? Figma, Sketch, Adobe?
Figma.
Figma's
Figma's the best.
But I think adding on to that, if you guys heard as well on our sharing, we also did a couple of branding, right? So I guess our software skills also varies. A lot of us also are able to do or deal with Adobe Suite in
Yeah.
general, but mainly the heavy use will be Figma. Yeah.
Yeah, because like for example, let's say you do some branding, it's like best to do it on Illustrator, because Figma's tools aren't really best for like those vector kind of paths. But at the same time, you also use After Effects to like animate some stuff as well. Yeah, so I think a good grasp of the Adobe Suite will be very useful too.
Okay, so next question, does OGP hire interns on a part-time basis? And I think there's a few questions on internship logistics, so I'll pass that to Russell.
Cool. Yeah, let me answer this. So there are a bunch of questions here. Whether we hire interns on a part-time basis, the duration of our internships, also some questions on the application window for internships. So let me try and answer that in like the next 20 seconds. So the short answer is we focus on full-time internships of a minimum of 3 months duration. The slightly longer explanation of why it really boils down to kind of how our design interns function, right? So you've heard from Jess, Viv, and Pras, what we really do, and it's how we practice internships in general, is we believe in plugging our interns into the day-to-day work of how product teams work and basically giving them responsibilities like what we expect from full-timers. That makes it quite difficult for people on part-time internships. So it's not that we are just against part-time in general, but just for the sake of learning, it's pretty important that we have people with us full-time. So we were looking at minimum 3 months basis on the same rationale as well, right? In terms of getting onboarded to products. If you're talking about longer term, so on a case-by-case basis, we could have conversations about whether we definitely need 3 months full-time. Maybe there could be part-time arrangements in the future, but our general default is toward full-time, definitely. In terms of application windows, our internships are actually open on a rolling basis, so you can literally apply anytime for internships. It doesn't just have to be summer, it could be off cycle, meaning outside the May, June, July, August period as well. Typically, we do see summer applications come in about 3 to 5 months before. So if you're looking at May, you're talking about start of the year all the way up to March. But really, it's open anytime for anyone to apply.
Thanks, Russell. So we have another question, which is OGP part of GovTech? How are the products different? Hong, can you answer this?
Yeah, for sure. So OGP is technically part of GovTech, but we're sort of split out from it to some degree in a sort of sandbox, a sort of policy sandbox, if that makes sense. So basically, the origin of OGP is this idea that, actually, instead of just taking things with GovTech Core, which, you make things in there, well, if you took a small group of people and some money and sort of you can move things a bit more quickly in a bit more agile manner and and demonstrate that how that works. And so yeah, we still report to the CEO of GovTech, but we run our own career schemes, we run our own hiring, we run our own marketing, we run our own sort of project selection and performance evaluation and things like that. And our budget is separate as well. So we report up to the same CEO of GovTech, so that we're the same. We do share a couple of systems here and there, but we are more or less independent from GovTech, but though we do report into the CEO of GovTech, if that makes sense. As well as sort of the Smart Nation civil service leadership as a whole. How are the products different? So I think that's probably the most interesting question. So to give you guys an idea of the order of magnitude, GovTech is about 3,000 people overall. OGP is about 50 people. So OGP is a lot smaller. The products are different in a few ways. One is that OGP products come from the ground up as opposed to top down, which is how most of GovTech gets their products. So for most of the government, the way IT projects are built, tech products are built, are that some senior leadership or someone will have an idea, they will commission a study, they'll write down the spec, they'll pass the spec down to GovTech, they'll ask the commission GovTech to build the project, GovTech will work on a few months, few years, build it, and then deliver, present to leadership, things like that. So they're sort of arms and legs to execute what our civil service leadership wants to build. OGP, on the other hand, takes the opposite approach, which is that for about 80% of our products on OGP, they are things that came from within the team that we identify that no one is building, but actually could be built and could have a lot of impact. And we then go try to get people to adopt them. So you can see how these would be two very different directions for getting products developed. And because, so the advantage of OGP's products are that one, we have a lot more flexibility in how we define the products because they are defined from the team and you have a lot more freedom to go and build and figure that out. The downside of it is, one, you have a lot fewer resources to build these products. So most of our product teams are like 4 to 5 people. So even vaccine.gov.sg is like maybe 6 people at most, which is pretty small for like literally the whole nation vaccination system. And the second downside is that your products, as opposed to sort of people coming to you to request things to build, you having building things yourself, you now need to go convince people to adopt the things that you have built. So for Forms SG, for Go.gov, for a lot of our tools, we'll build them and it's up to us to make them successful, which means that you don't have a ready market already of an agency who wanted this and is ready to adopt it. You sort of like build a prototype, you find someone who's interested, you get your first user, you shop it around, you talk to different people, try to understand the use cases, get them on board. And then you go from there. So those are like the 2 main ways our products and our teams are different. Hopefully that makes sense to people.
Thanks, Hong. So next question for our design interns is, what if we have no UI UX portfolio to show? What do you recommend us to do now? Anyone want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So I would start with let's say case studies. That's actually a great start. Maybe identify like a application or a service that you would like to actually reimagine or redesign. Then you could actually go through the same processes like what I mentioned earlier, like say the research phase, design, and then prototyping and testing it. And you can document all this and present it like in a slide deck. So I think like two case studies will be good to showcase like 1, the design eye, and 2, your UX process as well. So I guess having these case studies will be a good start. Yeah.
Okay, so my experience for this prior to the career switch, right, was, first of all, I did listen to a lot of like podcasts or YouTubers who, let's say, they don't have prior portfolio of UI UX. So I get to understand their point of view. What do they do if, let's say, they don't want to spend the money, for example, to pay for online course, right? So normally what would, I wouldn't say maybe ideal, but like what would they recommend usually normally was that you can find a few applications, or like what Pras mentioned, is to really find, let's say for example, your favorite app, but you find this app or like website trashy or shitty, for example, and really you will take that initiative to really redesign, for example, or find a pool of use cases that for example, it's not only you that you found this app or website to be the problem, but rather, let's say your friends also face the same problem, and then you can take that as a case study and then move on from there, or build a case study from there and iterate from there. At least there's a real life example to show the before and after, and how is it different, what are the improvements that you've made in terms of the changes and the UI UX. And so then you can at least show your UI UX, showcase your UI UX skills in this case.
Yeah, I think for your portfolio, what people usually want to see is your thinking process. So not really the end product. So for my case, when I applied for OGP at least, I didn't really have my end product ready yet. So I just documented my working process and the things that I did up to that point. So I don't think an end product is very, very important, but of course it would be nice to have some end products in your portfolio so that they can see like what you're capable of. But most important is definitely your thinking process, and it's okay to fail also. Yeah.
Thanks all for sharing. So I know we're almost at the end of our time, so I'll ask one more question. There's a question that says, thanks, Vivian, interesting projects, especially on legitimacy. What were your proudest moments while being a designer at OGP? So I'll start with Viv, and then I'll pass it on to our other interns.
Okay. Okay, let me think about this. Okay, well, I think like one of the highlights of my internship journey is that I actually got to present a panel, which was pretty interesting. I was actually the first intern and designer to present a panel, and yeah, that was such a good experience. Yeah.
just for people to know, panel is our OGP governance panel, which is comprised of Steve, GovTech, PermSec of Smart Nation, as well as the deputy CE and deputy PermSec.
Yeah, what about you guys?
For me, the proudest moment was actually on Askaf when I was able to actually like steer the product in terms of like the product direction. Having that impact as like a designer was one of the proudest moments for me. Yeah, because I feel that people just assume that we just do UI, UX, and screens, but it's like way more than that. Yeah, and having the impact was quite proud of me. Yeah.
For me, it's quite similar to Pras' case as well. So having said that, being involved with the complexity of the nature of its product, right? I was able to take on a lot of initiative and responsibility, as even though you're just, for example, just a design intern, regardless of your hierarchy or regardless of your title, I was able to, in a way, help not steer, but rather bring the team together and to consolidate all our thoughts together and actually bring the product in terms of its goals and its purpose. So in a way, making things more aligned. So like what Pras mentioned, instead of just iterating UI screens and such, you also get to discuss the product direction and to achieve the same goal as a team in general. Yeah.
Thanks all for sharing. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have. So thank you all so much for attending. If you saw in our post, we are giving out OGP t-shirts. So winners of the OGP t-shirts will be notified via email in 2 to 3 days. So please make sure to keep a lookout for that. But if you are interested in our internships or our full-time roles, please do scan this link here. We are hiring year-round, so please do go check out the website and apply. And yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you to our interns for sharing their experiences. Thank you all for attending, and hope you all have a great night.
Thanks, Sarah. Take care.